is absolutely nothing. Okay, and that is because the second piano has the phase inverted. Hi, welcome to another Music Monday. Today we're going to talk about phasing problems and what you can do about it. At the end of the day, can you hear it? Probably is the answer. If you're new here, welcome. If you're an old friend, also welcome. Episode 11, let's get on with it. Coming up, we're going to have a quick look at what phasing is. Is it something real or is it just something that exists in the mix? How to avoid some phasing problems in the first place, and I'll give you a quick demo showing some phasing problems and possible solutions that you may want to use. So what is phasing? Why bother with it in the first place? Well, you can see there 3 diagrams. The first one, if 2 waves are on top of each other, they are in phase. What you will eventually end up with is a louder sound. The opposite of that, or destructive phasing, is when a peak is opposite a trough and they will combine to give you 0 sound. That is probably not what you want. In the actual real world, multiple waves combine to create your final sound. And that is what we want. But what we want to be aware of is frequencies that mask each other, that are literally the polar opposites of each other, that create no sound or a very quiet sound. Like I said, it's something you will probably hear before you realise what it is. So, is this something real or is it something in the mix? Well, I did an episode talking about the fact that nightclubs play your tracks mostly in mono. So you can have phasing issues there where 2 speakers actually produce slightly out of phase signals and will cancel out at some parts of a club. Now normally there's not just 2 speakers, so that negates the problem. In terms of the real world, noise cancelling headphones, for example, work on this exact principle of phasing. Headphones have a microphone that detects the outside sound and it generates the opposite or out of phase by 180 degrees, so it cancels out the sound. That's also why they tend to be better at working or blocking mid to low frequency constant noises, but somebody speaking to you, the changes are not quite quick enough for the microphone to pick up, generate the opposite effect. So that's why you often hear people speaking if they are near you, but the overall ambience of, say, an aircraft hum of the engines is blocked out. But in terms of the mix and creating our music, essentially we do want what is happening on the left there. We want different instruments and different sounds combining together to create the overall sound. It's just what you don't want is opposite sounds completely cancelling each other out, because that gives you a thin sound and effectively could give you could completely lose an instrument in the mix. In the real world, to avoid phasing problems, this mainly comes down to the recording. Stereo pair microphones, so microphones that are comparable. Make sure if you are recording with stereo pair microphones, they're an equal distance from the sound source. So in the case of overheads for a drum kit, you would want them equal distance from the snare or the kick. And a sensible space. So is the room treated in some way to avoid reflections, because that can also cause problems with phasing when the sound comes back into a microphone that's recorded. Okay, let's have a look at an example using Logic. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why should I worry about phasing when synths use phasing to create width, and guitarists use phase pedals, and you know, it is a recognized effect, and that is true. When you're creating your tracks, most of the time you probably won't bother about this. The example of your music being played in a nightclub or any public space where there isn't a stereo set of speakers, that is where the problems can sometimes arise. So ideally you should check your mix in mono to make sure that it suddenly isn't becoming very thin in some places. So how do you do that? The first useful tool to have is a correlation meter. If we're to the right of this, that's a good thing. If we're to the left, it's a bad thing. So what we can do also on the master output is convert it to a mono signal. So we can turn that on, and now we have a mono signal. So let's just play this piano. Let's turn it into mono. And from the correlation meter, everything looks fine. Now, if I add a second piano on here, I'm deliberately going to mess this up in a second. So what you will hear there is absolutely nothing. Okay, and that is because the second piano has the phase inverted. So it is creating the exact opposite waveform of the first piano. So nothing. If I put these back, they now add to each other. The other thing that you might come across, and this will happen if you are mixing guitars, is when you pan them left and right. So we've got no phase difference, we've just got them on the left and the right hand side. So piano 1 on the left, piano 2 on the right. Now, obviously this is still coming out in mono, but if I now reverse the phase, it doesn't completely cancel things out. That's because the left and the right channels are being combined into mono. So it's thinner, it's a thinner sound, but it does still come through. And this is where you need to be aware of what is becoming thin in my mix. Is the piano, is the bass, are the drums becoming less audible in the mix when you play it? And it may, and often is, the case that all you need to do is go into the gain plugin and change the phase of the instrument, and that will solve your problem. There is another way to deal with phase issues, and that is with delay. So if we go back to panning these to the center and having opposite phase, we get no sound. But the other way you could deal with this is by delay, because if you remember the two waveforms sitting on top of each other and cancelling each other out, if we could move that one of those waveforms, we would get some sound back. So there is another way to do that. I'm going to use the delay function. So if I move that ever so slightly, 0.3 milliseconds, there is now some sound. Move it further, more of a sound, and you can hear there's more and more of the instrument is coming through as that delay is moved. So there's a couple of things to take away from that. Do check your mixes in mono and make sure that nothing is dropping out. If it is, there's two things to quickly look at. One is changing the phase using the gain plugin on your instrument, and the other option is to offset an instrument using some delay. There you go. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found that useful. Like and subscribe is always appreciated, and I will see you next Monday. Bye for now.